Hey, church family. Who in your family tree is a man of God or a woman of God? As we turn to Genesis chapter 5, we see the genealogy of Adam through his son Seth all the way down to Noah. Now, because we know this chapter contains a genealogy, we might be tempted to skip it, but we shouldn't do that because if we did, we would miss a very interesting and informative nugget in verses 21 through 24. In those verses, the author of Genesis introduces us to Adam's great-great-great-great-grandson Enoch. And he writes this: When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. As the author of Genesis sat down to compile this genealogy, he wrote down the names of his forefathers. He wrote down how long they lived. He wrote down the names of their children. But when he got to Enoch, he had to pause, because Enoch's life was so markedly different that he had to note what made him different. And we see there are two things that make Enoch different according to the author of Genesis. One, he walked with God. His life was marked by his relationship with God. And because his life was marked by his relationship with God, the second thing to note is that he was not, for God took him. Enoch was one of two people in Scripture who did not die. I'll let you look up the other person. And so as the author of Genesis put together this genealogy, he paused to say Enoch's life was different because he walked with God and God took him. Now let's go back to that question that I asked at the very beginning. Who in your family tree is that man of God or that woman of God? That when you look back, their life was so markedly different that you could say, he walked with God or she walked with God. And that now, even though they have died, they now live with God eternally in heaven, walking with God. And then let's look forward. Think about 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, when your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-great-grandchildren look back on their family tree. What will they say about you? What will they say about me? Will they say that our lives were so markedly different because of our relationship with God? That we walked with God? And that now, even though these mortal bodies are dead, that we live eternally with God in heaven? I hope so. So let's today focus on walking with God, so that as God walks with us, he can transform us so that we can transform those around us through his presence, and eventually transform our generations and generations and generations. Enjoy your time with Jesus today.